go ahead and put in the put in the chat where you're from and you're interested in VR. And yes, Tom, VR headsets do work better if you have no hair. That's a great a great question. Apparently, that's the theme for our presenters today. That's good.
Gotta represent boldness.
It's kind of like swimmers when they shave their head for
Right.
better speed under the water. You got to fit that those bands over your head. It's just easier this way. That's right. Doug says he's out on the VR team. He has a luxurious full head of hair. All of us would be very jealous of. All right.
All it means is you come out of VR a little sweatier. That's all.
That's right.
The only difference.
I love it.
I love that. That's good, man.
Ours is natural air conditioning. That's all.
Natural. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here today. I want to make sure that we're recording this webinar. And so we'll be sure to share this with you after the fact too, so that if you're just trying to take notes today and you don't quite get everything you want to, you can watch this after the fact and we'll be in touch on this. If you had any difficulty prior to today getting the link for the webinar, we apologize for that. This is the inaugural webinar of our a new webinar series that we're starting. And we actually just found out that some of our automated emails that should have been going out around the event might not have gone out. So I think all of you that are here were emailed directly. So thank you for coming. And thanks for making this a priority today. It's going to be a great learning experience for us all and a lot of fun too. So my name is Alex Robinson. I'm the Director of Marketing at Stadia. And so I'm just really getting things kicked off, and I'll be back later to facilitate some Q&A. But now I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Mozart Dixon.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mozart Dixon, and on behalf of Stadia, I want to say welcome. So glad you're all here for this webinar. I serve with the church multiplication team, and our mission at Stadia is to help you start thriving, growing, and multiplying churches for the next generation. And we've been doing that for now over 20 years, and we will continue to do so until every child has a church. And so we're constantly looking for new and innovative ways to go about making sure that every child on the planet has a church. And if you look at history over the last 500 years and beyond that, the mission of God has greatly benefited by leveraging the use of technological advancements of the day to open up new pathways and opportunities of introducing people to the Jesus. And so from the printing press to the television and the internet, we've seen new and creative ways of reaching people where they are. And so today, there are millions of people, and I didn't even know this, millions of people weekly who use VR in the space that's in. And that's millions of real people with real stories looking for real community and connection, and most of which do not know Jesus yet. And so that's why we're partnering today with Pastor Josh Amstutz from Lakeland Church and their resident VR expert, Stuart McPherson, to discuss VR ministry. Josh is the senior pastor at Lakeland Community Church in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Josh is married to Lisa, and together they have 9 amazing kids. Yes, I said 9. I thought I was doing something with 5, but 9 is bigger. Besides pastoring, Josh loves all things music related, working out. And if you've seen him in person, you know that he likes to work out, snowboarding, and anything lake life related, especially skiing. And so you can find them on the website if you want to know more about them. And then Stu McPherson is their VR campus pastor at Lakeland as well. He's written an ebook for your church in VR and is the host of the Metaverse Church podcast. And so these two here, they're in it, they're doing the work, and they're here to serve the rest of the church body in this space. And so, man, thank you guys so much for joining us today for this webinar. And I'm just looking to dive deep into this with you all. But I want to start out with the first question for the two of you. Why VR and why VR church ministry?
Do you want me to? I think I'm tackling that first. Why VR ministry?
Go for it, man. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, really, it kind of began actually with a conversation with some of the guys from Stadia probably 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at this point. And VR was just kind of way out there, and no one really knew exactly what it was going to look like. But we had an idea of man, could we continue to reach more people in that space? And so digital ministry as a whole we were pressing into it, but started dreaming all right, are there going to be a lot of people in this space? Well, now come to find out, we're talking like, 270, 300 million people in that space. So that's like the population of the United States. So if you imagine the population of the United States, and they're in there and they're walking around in there and they're doing life, actually. I mean, there's a lot of people. Stu could probably speak to the exact number, but it's probably like 20% of people engage in VR socially. Like they're looking for social engagement there. So that's still a significant number of people. They're not just looking to video game there. They're like looking for community and friends. And it's really, it's actually way more engaging than just watching something on a screen, because it's actual engagement with people. And so it
Wow.
became the question of, man, could we do this and take the gospel in there just in an effective way? And so that's kind of what started it. And then, snowball from there. And we've just learned a ton. And so we'll get into all the things we've learned. But that's a lot of the why. The why was just people are there, and a lot of people. If you think about the population of the United States, if you were to say, hey, there's only, let's say, 10 churches, I think at the point that might have been the number of churches that were exploring it. If there were 10 churches in the United States, period, we'd be like, they need more churches. And so that's
Right.
kind of how we started thinking about it, going, well, that space needs more churches or ministry happening there. So that was our why.
Whoa, that's crazy. All right, so then tell us a little bit more. So we've gotten the why. Tell us a little bit more of like the how, and then like what exactly is VR church or ministry? How's that defined for you guys, and how are you working through that?
Yeah, Stu will take us, he'll do kind of the deep dive into some of the how. I'll cover a little bit about even defining the what, because we, Stuart and myself and many others who kind of were trailblazing into this had to figure out language around what we were doing. As it started, it really began with church and VR. And that for a lot of people, so I'm speaking as a senior pastor, and I really want to speak to the vast number of maybe senior pastors or ministry leaders out there who are going, I don't think I can handle, like I can barely handle my own church, much less another church or a whole other campus. Like I can barely handle my campus. How am I going to handle another one? And so one of the big things and the big shifts that we've made more recently is kind of, I don't know, taking the word church out of the equation, actually, and picture it less like, hey, your VR church that you need to launch, and picture it like VR ministry. Like if you do men's ministry at your church or you do women's ministry, because there's a ton of men in this world and there's a ton of women. Well, hey, have you ever considered VR ministry? Because there's a ton of people in VR. And likely there's already someone in your church congregation who's actually wired for this, wants to do this, and would be really successful at doing this. And they could be the leader within your church to take it there. So a lot of it is actually changing the language to recognize that a lot of what we're really doing is we are doing VR ministry there. And does your church have any representation of VR ministry happening? And we want to help you get there.
That's amazing. Thanks for that. So just to again keep drilling a little bit deeper in there. Why should these church leaders and us, I mean, in our local spaces, be like? Why would we pay attention to this? And how does that work with starting churches and VR kind of at the same time? Like, what's you guys' perspective on that right now?
Well, Stu, I'll let you chime in for sure, but I would say here's one of the reasons why we need to pay attention, and we, the church, needs to be paying attention now. I would picture it like this. How many of you have one of these in your pocket? Well, it's probably like all of us. Now, how many of us had one of these in our pocket, 10 years ago? Probably none of us. But there came a point where all of a sudden it became the common tool to be able to do communication, do work, and I mean, stay connected. I really believe VR, I mean, you got 300 million people who are going, this is a legitimate tool in my life. I really believe we're going to kind of crest a hill where all of a sudden that's going to become so normalized that the church would be foolish to not have a strategy and a plan on how to effectively engage there with the vast number of people who are already there. Like it would just be crazy to try to show up late to the party and be like, we should figure out how to do this. Well, let's try to figure out how to do it effectively, because not all means of ministry in VR work. Stu will definitely be able to speak into that reality. Not everything works there, but there are some things that really do work there, and so those are the things we're figuring out. Stu's really trailblazing into that. I don't know, Stu, you want to add anything?
Man.
No, man, I think that you hit it just right. For any conversation that I have on this, the history of the church has always shown that the church is late to adopt and adapt into any new form of technology that comes out. But who's not late to adopting or adapting to it is the enemy. The enemy dives right into it, and he looks to sink his hooks in and take advantage of it as quickly as possible. And then the church is kind of sitting there going, man, we probably should have done this a little bit sooner. So our focus is really that. It's like, we've had the opportunity to trailblaze this for a while now, but now it's more of, we want to be the advocate that helps every church get in on VR, knowing that there is really a great harvest out there for it.
Yeah.
Man. So what I hear you guys saying is, man, we as church leaders, because this is a world that's developing, have the opportunity to kind of jump in early on and be early adopters to a technology that you're saying, hey, in the future, this is going to be as common as the internet and the iPhone in our pocket. The fact that we have supercomputers on a daily basis just sitting in our pockets versus where we were in the 90s, where we're waiting on things to chime in after we got an email after 10 minutes. Like, we're not talking about that now. We're talking about in the VR space. This is going to be something that's going to innovate in those kinds of ways. So if that's true, then what are some of the stories that you guys are hearing right now? What are some life change that's happening in your space as you're pursuing being the first adopters in this space?
Stu, go for it, man. You're the one who's living in the stories.
Yeah. To be honest with you, so the biggest thing that I'm starting to see is there are a whole bunch of people that are participating in virtual reality that they see us launch a service and they hop in to this event, and next thing I know is they're coming in and they lay down some string of curse words that you didn't even know it could be strung together. And it's always finished with, this is an actual church. And I'm like, yeah, we're in here doing church right now. And it throws them off. But the beauty of it is this: most of those people who come in, they straight up tell us, I will never walk in through the physical church building. I won't walk in through the doors. I don't feel welcome there. I don't feel safe there. I don't feel like my story belongs there, what have you. Fill in the blank with why they won't go in. But what we found is they also have their questions. They still have their questions regarding religion or Christianity as a whole. And so instead of going to a place where they can have those questions answered, they're going to technology and they're going to Google or what have you in order to have those questions answered. But now, because of a church in virtual reality, they're coming in, one, thinking that it's a joke. They find out that it's a legitimate church. And now they actually have a person that they can talk to and bring those questions forward to look to get an answer to. And so the majority of the people that I talk to, they'll come in and they'll say, I don't believe what it is that you believe in. And I tell them, perfect. That's exactly why we're here. Like, I say that 90% of the people that are in virtual reality are non-Christian or opposed to Christianity, totally. And when I say that as a generous number, is probably closer to 98%, if not higher. It's just a platform. It is a space that is just not really Christian friendly for the most part. And so they tell me, I don't believe what you believe in. And I'm like, perfect. That's why we're here. And then it's always followed up with, but I do have questions. So it's a place where people are feeling comfortable to ask their questions. And I always liken it to the Catholic, confessional, if you will. You've got the priest on one side, you've got the confessor on the other side, and there's this great divider in between them. And because I can't see your face, you can't see mine, let me just word vomit all the stuff that I've been doing or been going through. Well, instead of it being this divider of a screen, what it is, it's the divider based off of an avatar to avatar. I'm not trying to save face with you. You're not trying to save face with me. So I'm willing to just word vomit everything that I'm going through. Now tell me why that's wrong, or tell me how do I get better or whatnot. And so some of the questions that I'll get from churches will be like, is this is this real? It's a virtual reality. Like, can you really do ministry in these spaces? And to be honest with you, I'd probably say we can probably do more heartfelt ministry than we do in the physical spaces because people aren't trying to save face. They're willing to just let us know everything that's going on. They're bringing their deepest, hardest questions right from the get-go, and it's just like, okay, then let's journey through this together. And the tricky side of it is once you log off, how do you stay connected with these people? And that's where we've taken advantage of a platform called Discord, which is just a chat server similar to Slack. And we just invite everybody who joins us for service to take a next step and join us on Discord and stay connected with us. And I invite every single one of them. If you have questions about the Bible, pick one of the four gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Let's start journeying through it together. And every time that you have a question, we'll stop right there and we'll chase after that question. If I don't have the answer to it, then we'll chase after that together until we have the answer that you're looking for or something that you're least comfortable with. So those are just the common stories. I mean, I kid you not, we've got a guy who works at a tattoo parlor just up the street from Lakeland. And I went one day to go get some therapy done, if you will. And I'm sitting there with my arm out and I knew it was coming, right? Like working in ministry, I know what he does. He's going to go, oh, you know what I do? And
Right.
sure enough, it comes up. He goes, so what do you do? And I go, well, I work at Lakeland. And he goes, the church just down the road? I said, yeah. And he says, what do you do there? I was like, I'm the VR campus pastor for Lakeland. And he's just like working away at my arm and he stops and he looks up at me and he goes, VR. I said, VR. He's like, as in MetaQuest 2 headset. And the moment he said that, I was like, we speak a common language. Yep,
Yes.
I use a MetaQuest 2 headset. And he starts telling me how he came to Lakeland a long time ago, I think before Josh was here. He's like, I'll never go back to Lakeland. In fact, I won't go to any local church. And then he goes, but I'd be interested in checking out a VR church. And so he and I just started having this conversation. I was able to give him the invite. I don't know that he ever took me up on it because everybody uses like a metaverse name, but you know, is creating opportunities for people who won't normally show up to the church, the opportunity to find their way in and maybe be introduced to Jesus for the first time, if not a reconnection for sure.
Oh man, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Sue, man. So here's the crazy thing. So I feel like we've heard like the reason, like we know that we should be a part of this. There's no question about it. You have real people. I heard you say that like basically their anonymity allows you a gateway into some heart stuff, actually probably a little bit quicker than even a face-to-face interaction might get you. And then you get these real stories, you know, like the tattoo artist or whoever else that might be in this collection of people. So we as church leaders, that's an easy enough reason to say, hey, we need to be in that space. If we can gain access to people's hearts so that we can introduce them to Jesus and what Jesus wants to do with that, we're in. So if we're in, what's some of the nuts and bolts, the practical of diving into this space?
Yeah. So I've got some slides. I'll pull up a slide deck for us real quick. I know that we've covered some of it at this point, but just to make sure that we've covered all the bases, we'll get there. So just kind of quickly going through our reasons why we would want to do VR ministry. Obviously, we've talked about it, 171 million active VR users, 200 million in the next year. If you hopped on early on in this call before we got started, what you guys heard was Apple obviously launched the Apple Vision Pro. The pre-sale was January 19th. In the first 15 minutes, they sold $300 million worth of product. 80,000 units went out. So I've heard some rumors that VR is a dying technology. Not a chance. It's still growing. In fact, I even just came across a recent research from PushPay that says that about 19% of the churches that they are involved with are looking into metaverse ministry in this next year. So it's continuing to grow and churches are continuing to dive into it. You heard Josh talk about a primary use for it is still community. We're community-based beings. So no matter what, whenever we hop into anything new, we're still going to look for community with somebody else like-minded. And then, of course, the global reach is crazy. Only a third of that 170 billion that we've been talking about are US-based. And 2/3 of all those users are male. So if you have a hard time reaching the male audience within your community, your male audience are all in virtual reality for the most part. So low cost investment to get into this. Meta has their Meta Quest 3 that you could get your hands on. That will give you a good price tag of like $500. If you've got the money for the Apple Vision Pro and you're willing to wait probably a year at this point to get it, you could go for the $3,500. But here at Lakeland, we still use the Meta Quest 2, and it's great for just doing ministry. You can just hop over to Amazon and get your hands on it for $250. The other aspect of it too, nuts and bolts. So like this is where we really start talking about nuts and bolts. It's like, okay, Stu, what does it take for us to really do VR ministry? Well, past the headset, the next thing that you're going to want to know is what are the platforms that are out there for you to use? And the best part is of the 5 main biggest platforms, they're all free. So it's not going to cost you anything to get into it. So once you got your headset, you just go into their app store and you download the 5 that you see at the bottom of your screen there. And those are labeled out in order of like the highest user base. So VR chat on a regular basis has tens of thousands of users on at a time, followed by a rec room with thousands of users. Big screen is the platform that we primarily use right now. And they've got hundreds of users on at a time. The Meta Horizon Worlds and Spatial are really the platforms you're going to be looking at to be using. So that being said, how do you use VR ministry for your church? Well, 3 practical ways that you can do it. So what we're going to cover, just your worship experience, like historical and biblical tours, and then my favorite right now, evangelism training. So at Lakeland, we bring in our IRL in real life worship experience into virtual reality. And the way that we do it is by doing broadcasting and on demand. So Big Screen has a built-in feature with YouTube. So anytime that we go live for our church services, we're able to just pop into our headset, go into the platform of choice, Big Screen, and then we open up an event that anybody who's using Big Screen at that time can hop into. And we just pull up the live YouTube feed and we just broadcast it in there. And then as people are coming in, we're making connections with them, just like a greeting team would, a prayer team, all those kinds of things. And we're just connecting with people in virtual reality and just let them know, hey, we are a church that meets here. And if there's anything that we can pray for you about or you have any questions, we would love to be able to answer those for you. Another practical use would be that live teaching, which would be the avatar to avatar, which I know some VR churches do. But it's like live teaching would be optimal for any of those platforms. As long as you have a headset and you're willing to talk to people, you got it. Broadcasting would be limited to like big screen spatial. VR chat does have some streaming capabilities, but it's got some major limitations to it as well. The other thing that you can use this for at your church would be like for historical and biblical tours. So I know when I first got my headset here at Lakeland, the first thing that I did is I went skydiving and I got motion sickness because who goes skydiving while sitting in a chair? Don't do it. But the next thing that I did is I started researching, like, can I do a tour through Israel? Can I go to Rome? Can I go to Greece? And what I ended up finding is that there are tour agencies that have created their tours virtually for you to be able to take. So imagine you've got, let's say, 2 to 3 headsets at your church, and you got people who are wanting to go on an Israel tour. Maybe you've got one coming up and they're wanting to get almost a hands-on experience without actually going there first and foremost. And you're able to show them what this tour that you're about to take them on is going to look like. So they become a lot more comfortable. Or maybe you're having a hard time getting people to sign up for a tour. Just by throwing a headset on them, maybe you can get a little bit more interest in there. The other thing that you could do is you could walk through biblical books. So there are some churches that do this. They've got some people who are really great at world building. You could probably find somebody who could do this for you. But instead of just teaching like a Sunday message, what they've done is they create worlds based off of these biblical books. And you see it there, that instead of just reading about Jonah, you are Jonah. So if you're trying to give your people like a more hands-on practical experience of like making the Bible come alive for them, like imagine that you are on the ship and you're out in the middle of the sea and the waves are rocking, you're being tossed around back and forth, you hear the thunder, you hear the waves crashing. The next thing you know, you're being thrown into the water. This creature comes and swallows you up. You're sitting in this like dark, what feels like a damp space because you're hearing the water dripping all over the place. And then you're being spit up on the beach of Nineveh and you're walking into town and all that kind of stuff. Like the use for VR for the church has a way of making the Bible come alive that maybe for some people it's just what they need in order for it to take them to a whole new level than what they've ever experienced before. So, and then the third innovative way that you guys could be looking at using this for ministry wise is just evangelism training for your people. So, our friends over at Lifeway and Barna, they dropped up these studies. Only 3 in 10 unchurched Americans say a Christian has ever shared with them one-on-one how a person becomes a Christian. And from Barna, just this past year, 40% of pastors believe their church is effective at reaching out to non-Christians or inviting people to become Christians, with few going so far as to say they're very effective. So what does that mean when it comes to evangelism training? Well, when 98% of the people that are using VR don't have any kind of Christian background whatsoever, you're going to get into conversations with people who have a lot of those questions that we were talking about. You're going to come across people who are very confrontational to the idea of Christianity. And what it sets up is this opportunity for your congregants to sit there with a seasoned believer who's able to handle some of these questions, or they love being in conversation with people like that. And they're learning for themselves how to handle and navigate questions and confrontation along the lines like that. And so this is what we've seen. We've seen where people who are just wallflower Christians, like they don't like getting confrontational. They wouldn't know how to answer a question if somebody asked. They're seeing it modeled, whether it's me or another teammate. And all of a sudden we're seeing them go from being, I'm going to sit this one out, to getting out of the bleachers and getting into the game and getting into conversations with people. And I've heard them come back and tell me stories about how, because of their experience in virtual reality, it's actually given them more of a boldness and a know-how in order to navigate those conversations in their local community, either here in Lake Geneva. We've got a teammate out in Idaho that's able to say, hey, what do you believe about Jesus? Do you believe there's a heaven? Do you believe there's a hell? And they're able to now navigate questions and conversations like that, like they've never been able to before, because they've learned how to do it. So I've a guy that I was talking to the other day. He's like, FBI and police agencies, they have like a simulation that trains their agents to know what to do in high pressure, high tense situations. Do I pull the trigger? Do I not pull the trigger? How do I handle this, high tense situation? And he said, it sounds like virtual reality is that for churches. It's the assimilation of helping believers know how to have spiritual conversations with people, maybe when they've never been trained to do so before. So that's just some of the stuff that could be beneficial for you and your church as when it comes to launching a VR ministry. What I've learned is sometimes it's the questioning part where you get a lot more of your meat and potato answers that you're looking for. So I will turn it over for that aspect.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Stuart. Man, my mind is blown and spinning, whatever the right metaphor is. I love all of these things that you've laid out. And so if you have any questions as we've been going along, as Stuart and Josh have been sharing, go ahead and put those questions either in the chat, or you can use the Q&A feature. That's fine too. We'd love to take a stab at answering those for you. Obviously, we want this to be of huge value to you in what you're trying to get started with VR ministry. And also, we want to make sure that we're speaking directly to your situation as you try to get started. So please feel free to engage in the chat and the Q&A. I have a couple questions kind of just to kick us off, though. So for the people who are listening and watching and thinking, man, I have this vision. I want to start a VR church. I want to start a VR campus. We have a couple guys. I know Ronnie and Matt mentioned that they're considering starting a VR campus. What's kind of there, aside from like the equipment and the nuts and bolts, like what are some baby steps that they can take if like starting the VR campus seems potentially overwhelming, or like where do you get started? What's like the next best step for them as they try to work towards a campus or a VR church? And in either one of you, feel free to take a stab at that. What have you, I guess, to put it more personal,
I would say,
yeah.
So, Stu, you're going to be able to give some other quick next step, nuts and bolts. But I would say it starts with kind of find your leaders. Find one other person who wants to do this with you. Stu, wouldn't you say it's really important to have at least one other person who's kind of helping man the space, like kicking out trolls, manning technology? You have to get really used to the fact that every single week you're going to have some tech issue. Like that happens all the time. So in church, like we flip out if there's something goes wrong in a church setting. No one flips out in VR. Like you will have a problem every single week. It's just kind of a part of the game, and no one's going to be mad at you. And so that's like, but find another person. The other thing that I would say is, Stu, answer this one. What's the personality of the person they're looking for to join them in helping them launch VR ministry at their church?
That's so good.
Yeah. So I would say, like, for me, my makeup is like I'm a apostolic evangelist as a whole. So as somebody who has like that heartbeat just to know Jesus and make Jesus known, no matter where it is that they're at. Like you can take that personality and go, let's put you in South Africa. Let's put you in the Bronx. Let's put you in wherever. And their heartbeat is still, I know Jesus, you need to know Jesus. So let me take that into this environment. So that's really the person that you're looking for, is somebody who is just like sold out for Jesus, and they're just looking for a way to just make him famous wherever it is that they're going. So, which is, I think, to be honest, like that's probably one of the most surprising parts for me, even in all this. The invitation from Josh for me to help spearhead like Lakeland going into VR was so surprising to me, because I'm not a video game player whatsoever. I love telling people the last gaming console that I owned was an Xbox 360 that I bought off of a credit card in order to play Blu-ray videos that Dave Ramsey's still screaming at me about. I bought a gaming system to watch movies on, not actually play games. So when that invitation came, I'm like, I'm not your guy, you guys. But our next gen director, who helped in the process of it, that's where that combo comes into play. Like he spoke the language, he knew how to do it. And then all I had to do was come alongside him and bring in like this, let's build a small group mentality, or let's reach out to people and just see if we can't build community in the process of it. So you might be thinking, I'm looking for the video game person. It might not be. It's literally going to be the person that, I know Jesus. Jesus needs to be known by other people. Point me in the direction I need to go.
Yeah, I would say based on what I've watched you guys do and the people who have thrived in our teams, it's kind of two personalities. It's the evangelist, people who just love telling people about Jesus. If you have an evangelist in your church, you want them in VR. They will be in a spiritual conversation with someone, and they are going to be energized as a result of being there in less than 5 minutes. Seriously, 5 minutes, you will be in a spiritual conversation, and they're going to love it. And then the second personality I would say is just the person who's super, I don't know, a people person. Like on our team, it's this guy Brock, who has been a part of that team in the past. He can talk to anybody. It's just that person who can walk up to anyone and just talk to anyone and disarm them. Those are great people on your team.
That's so good. So let me kind of ask a follow-up question then with that, because in hearing the kind of wiring that you all are talking about, we've been using this language of evangelist, or I know Stuart mentioned he's an apostolic evangelist. Stadia uses an APES tool, which if you're not familiar and you're on the call, this is a great way to assess for gifting in leadership in the church. And APES stands for Apostle, Prophet, Evangelist, Shepherd, Teacher. And so do you guys use any specific assessment to try to discover people's wiring, or is this just more as you're talking with them, you're kind of discovering this about people's wiring?
Yeah, probably the second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. That's awesome. Well, I think, that makes so much sense, and that's so helpful, to think through that wiring for people. And if you're out there and you're looking for a way to assess that, you can find lots of different APES tools. And also with the people person, maybe something like a strengths finders test or something even as simple as that could help you in, kind of determining a person's strengths if it's hard to kind of size that up, or if you need a system for that.
But I would say, Stu,
yeah.
you have figured out our like for our groups, because we run our service, but then really throughout the week we're running groups, and which are event kind of based, but those are more bent toward the individual, whoever's running the event, who's ever running the group, what's their passion, what's their ability level. So those who might feel like, man, I can just kind of hold a conversation, I can facilitate a conversation. Like we've run alpha in VR in groups, and that has really done really well. You just have to be a facilitator and a kind of a caring person. So almost anyone can go in. You just might have to shape up the group or the event that they're running. Because we've talked a lot about church, but really I would say, and Stu, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the majority of really the ministry happens almost more like, picture it more like a group versus a church. Because that's, I mean, even when we run church, there's 10 people in there, maybe 15 on the high side. So if you picture it through the lens of groups, okay, now that's all of a sudden a whole lot more doable for a lot of our church leaders. They're like, oh, okay, so really what you're asking me to do is run a group in VR? Yes. Okay, and then we'll help you even kind of build out what's the best group that you might be able to help launch, or how you're going to bring your service in there, or chop up your service. We've done everything from chopping up our services, showing it in 5-minute segments, followed up with questions, things like that. It's all real conversational, but
that's so good. Yeah.
And I would even add to just that initial question that you asked, like, what is like that entry level aspect to it? Go hop around in the different platforms and just spend time in there. Like, it is crazy. There have been different events that I have ran where I'm just like in big screen, I'll just open a room and title it "Hang Out with the Pastor," or I'll just title it like "Worship Night" or something like that. And like, it still has like that churchy connotation to it, but people come in and they ask what it's about. People are looking for a conversation, and we are spiritual beings to the core of who we are. So every conversation still eventually gets to a spiritual conversation, whether that's what the event was designed for or not, it still gets there. And so it's just that, I've been told like one of the best ways that you could describe this to people for each of those platforms that we were talking about, each one has its own language, it has its own community, it has its own, identity. And so in the same way that as a missionary goes out into the mission field, they get to know the community that they're going into, they're learning the language and all that. That's really what you have to do. Like, you have to go into each of those 5 platforms, learn the heartbeat behind it, and then determine, is this where I fit? Like, do I fit in this spot? Can I make Jesus known in this spot? And sometimes it's just going to feel natural. And other times you're like, okay, I need to investigate something else to see where that fit is.
I love that. And I mean, that's even, that's so great. Stadia, we'll do that with our potential new church leaders that are going through our discovery process to try to figure out, where they're hoping to start a church and what that contextual fit looks like for them. So this is awesome to hear, even to think about that in like the VR and digital space. We have another question here from Ronnie in the chat that I wanted to make sure that we got. So he said, within VR chat or worlds, or actually any of those platforms, do you or did you create a quote unquote campus or church atmosphere building in the 3D space? Does that make sense?
Yep, 100%. The quick answer is yes, we did. Our initial launch into it, we didn't. We launched into a platform called Altspace, and we just really looked at what was it that Altspace offers, and we took advantage of what they offered just to get going. We eventually got to the point where we hired out somebody to build us a world for us to do ministry in, which for that platform at that time, it was needed. And really the idea behind it was, we sit on the corner of a really two busy main roads here in the Lake Geneva area. And if anybody in our county is going through a hard time, they might not have ever walked into Lakeland before, but as they're on their journey to work or on their way home, they see a church along the side of the road and they go, well, maybe somebody in there has an answer for the hope that I'm looking for right now. They might pull off the side of the road and come talk to a pastor. Well, the question for me became, well, how do we as Lakeland become that for the people in virtual reality? Like, how do we become the street corner church for them? And so I just went to Josh and our XP and said, I think we need a world that we can have open 24/7. And it's not something that we have to be staffed at, but it's something that we have something that people can interact with. And then there's always the next step for them to get in contact with me or get plugged into our Discord community. And so we took that idea and it's like, this is how we become the street corner church within VR. Now, Altspace shut down almost a year ago. We haven't ventured into that aspect yet for like world building again and creating a church. But we've just taken advantage of what the platforms have, and it's been just as successful. I would say that the key part for us becomes way more intentional in the sense of, okay, here are my team members. Let's try to spread you guys throughout the week to do your own events in here that then point people back to the Lakeland Discord for deeper community afterwards. And Josh and I have talked about this before, that it's really kind of interesting when you think about it for VR. Like in physical ministry, we try to get people into the church building to do worship and to come to know Jesus. And then we try to find them community to be a part of as they continue their spiritual journey. In virtual reality, it's almost the opposite. It's almost like you're launching all these different events in order to attract people. And then we point them and say, oh, by the way, I'm part of a church that meets here in VR on Sunday. So if you want to join us or you want to know more about that, hop over to our Discord. And the beauty of it is, because we all take different days and times throughout the week to like run our own different events, whether that's alpha or trivia or what have you, we're all of a sudden becoming friends with these people at different times. And then when we all show up for our service Sunday morning and their friends list lights up with like 5 to 10 people that are in Lakeland VR right now, they're more likely to come join us. And it's almost like the digital invite card within VR because it's common people that they see all together in one spot.
Oh, that's so cool. That's amazing. I mean, so many different questions kind of even flowing from that. Like, I think we could continue this conversation for a while. One of the things too that I wanted to mention for Ronnie's sake is in just a little bit, we're going to throw a link in the chat at the end of the webinar. And Stuart has a way for, even if you don't have a VR headset, you can follow this link. We actually got to try this out when we were kind of meeting in advance of the webinar. And it was so cool to be able to kind of go into a space that they're utilizing in some ways for their what they're doing in VR now, and you can get a glimpse of kind of what they're doing there and experience even without a headset. So we want to mention that's coming up as well. We're actually just about out of time. We're going to try to wrap up here at 2:45. So I want to make sure that we get some next steps in here as well. In talking with Josh and Stuart, Stuart's just put the link in the chat that after our webinar, we're going to head over there. For anybody that wants to come along, you're welcome to join us in that space and have some fun there and kind of, like Stuart mentioned, kind of play around in one of these spaces that might be a good fit for you to utilize as you look at starting a VR campus or ministry or church, whatever it is that you're evaluating. And also we want to make sure after this webinar, you'll get an email that'll have not only the recording of the webinar, but then some helpful links to contact these guys after the fact. If you have more questions, one of the things that we love about working with Josh and Stuart is just seeing their passion to resource the church and to see more people engage in this vital space for the church to be present in. And we heard all about that right at the beginning of the webinar, how vital that is. And then if you'd like to connect more with Stadia, I'd send you to stadia.org/vision trips would be a great place to start. And we'll put that link here in the chat as well. And what that will allow us to do is to connect with you. If you're a church leader and you're thinking about how do we multiply, how do we take the vision that God's given us, and how do we replicate that in other spaces and places? One of the things that we love about Stadia is we're not so concerned with models of church, but that more churches get started, whatever the model. We believe our vision is for every child to have a church, and that's those children like Stuart's tattoo artist, right? You know, the guy, and we've heard that story a couple of times, some folks who would never darken the doors maybe of our brick and mortar churches, but are very likely to go and check out what's this church about in VR. So we want to invite you to reflect on that, both in further discussion with Josh and Stuart. And Stadia would also love to talk to you more. If you have a vision for starting more churches and multiplying in your region or in the US or around the world, we'd love to connect with you. And a great way to do that is on one of these vision trips. We have one coming up actually in February that's going to be in San Jose, which is also a great physical location, kind of out of the virtual space at this point. But if you want to go to a great spot in the States, San Jose is not a bad one. So be sure to check that out, and we'd love to see you there. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're just at time. And like I mentioned, Stuart has put that link in the chat, and we want to join you over there. You know, we had one other question kind of come through here right at the end, and as I was talking, I missed it. So if you guys have a couple minutes longer, can we hit this last question and then we'll hop over? Okay. So
yeah,
Alex says, does geography matter? If geography doesn't matter, is it better for a few churches to be awesome at this, or is it important that churches all over join in? Will too many churches clutter the virtual world with mediocrity? This is a really fascinating question. What would you all say?
I think it's a great question. I don't think you can clutter a world that has 200 million people in it, because you got to realize those 200 million people, they're not hanging out in one space together. They are in literally thousands of smaller spaces. And so it would take us forever to honestly infiltrate all of those spaces with Christians who are trying to be strategic to take the gospel there. And then the other piece is, honestly, there's just, once again, there's so many people that need to have a conversation, just like Stu was talking about. Like, they have lots of real questions that need real answers with someone who will love them through their questions. And few people doing it will not get it done. We need more and more churches in there, like, having these grace-filled conversations with people who have real questions around their walks with God. Stu, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so our vision right now is to help get 100 churches into VR within the next 10 years. And to be honest with you, I think that the amount of churches is too small, and the amount of time, it could be done a lot quicker than that. So that in itself really kind of answers the question as to whether I think that will clutter the space. I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, like, look, Stadia is trying to plant a church for every child, right? So you almost have to take that same mentality for churches in virtual reality. We need a church for every person that's in VR, because what we do at Lakeland, it's not going to speak a love language to every single person that's in there. We're going to need different styles of churches doing different ways of ministry in there in order to reach people. But the question regarding geography, the only way that geography matters, there are people, this is fun actually, I just got off of a call before this one. There are people on the other side of the globe that we probably won't ever reach just because of the time zone differences, right? And you know, that's how it is. Like, now, that being said, like, we've reached people in the UK, we've reached people in the Middle East, we've reached people in South America, North America, you name it. We've had people from all over the world. But if we have more churches that are willing to get started on the other side of the globe, then our reach, the kingdom reach, becomes greater. And so what was fun about the call before this was it was actually one person in South Africa that's interested in planting a church in VR. And so she was having a conversation with me about it. And then she was telling me about a network of churches that she's involved with, 20 of them. And I just asked her, I was like, look, I can help you get into VR. But wouldn't it be way more fun if you and those 20 other churches all went on the same journey at the same time and just have like a net support with us at Lakeland to be there for you guys in the process? Because you guys are going to reach people that will never be able to. So geography is not going to matter at all, but geography matters in the sense of if you're in, the Pacific Northwest while we're in the Midwest, we'll have some, crossover for sure, but we'll never have crossover with people in Japan or South Africa or anything like that. So
yeah, that's such an interesting point, because people are hitting VR at almost the same time every day. Like they're throwing on their headsets at 9:30 at night. And so, there's kind of these unique things that if we can have churches going at different times all across the globe, that is to our benefit.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you guys for that. And thank you, Alex and Ronnie, for those questions, others that put questions in there. Great stuff. Really fascinating conversation. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go ahead and wrap this part of our webinar up. Again, don't forget that link up above here in the chat to spatial.io. You'll see that up there from Stuart. In fact, I don't know if it'll let me copy. There we go. I'm going to copy and paste it below just in case anybody has trouble finding it.
I was about to say, can I drop in one more link below that one?
Yeah, please do. Please do. Yeah.
So just in case anybody on this wants to investigate more the idea of bringing your church and starting a VR ministry for yourself, like, again, that is my heartbeat right now. That's the heartbeat here at Lakeland. So that link there is just really more of like a digital business card. It's a way for you to be able to get a hold of me. I know you guys are going to drop one in as well to get a hold of me and Josh, but that's just the quick way if anybody wants to further the conversation. So
that's perfect. And we'll be sure that these links get included in the follow-up email as well. Again, thanks everybody for joining us. We hope to see you at the next one. We have another webinar planned for April. More details on that coming soon. Let's hop on over to spatial.io.